Tabletop role-playing games are generally built as engines of progression. You start as a nobody, kill a few goblins, find a better sword, and eventually level up into an untouchable demigod. Then, in 1981, Chaosium published Call of Cthulhu. Instead of ascending to godhood, players take on the roles of fragile human beings. The monsters are bulletproof, the magic is corrupting, and your primary objective is simply surviving the night with your mind intact. Peterson replaced standard monster slaying with what he called the onion skin. A routine investigation into a missing library book shifts into a search for a hidden cult, which eventually reveals a global conspiracy to awaken a sleeping god. It presented a unique design paradox. The developers had to build a system that actively encouraged players to sit down at a table and voluntarily walk into an experience mathematically engineered to guarantee their eventual doom. To enforce that sense of dread, the game introduced Sanity, a numerical measure of a character's mental resilience. When an investigator encounters something unnatural, they roll percentile dice. If they roll below their current sanity score, they might lose a point or two. If they roll above it, they take severe mental damage, represented by larger dice rolls. A sudden loss of 5 or more points triggers a bout of madness. Player control is stripped away by the keeper, the game's moderator, and replaced with immediate mechanical consequences. An investigator might drop their weapon, develop sudden amnesia, or flee in blind panic. This strict simulation of psychological trauma is brilliant for generating tension, but it required the keeper to track an immense amount of variable data, from phobias to temporary hallucinations. The mental overhead required to track this descent into madness made the game's darkest secrets feel out of reach for many groups. For years, the sheer weight of these psychological rules served as an unintentional gatekeeper. For the first 30 years of its lifespan, spanning 6 editions, the core rules of Call of Cthulhu barely moved. Lead developer Lynn Willis implemented careful, iterative refinements, but the underlying chassis remained the same. Then, in 2014, writers Mike Mason and Paul Fricker stripped the engine down to the studs to release the 7th edition. Their first structural revision was physical. They took the massive, overwhelming master rulebook and cleaved it in two, separating the player-facing investigator handbook from the keeper rulebook. They also released a streamlined quick start guide and starter set. These focused entirely on teaching the core D100 percentile resolution system, where players try to roll beneath a target number on 2 10-sided dice, before introducing any complex secondary mechanics. By physically compartmentalizing the rules, Chaosium lowered the barrier to entry by reducing the mental load on new players. Inside the game, situational math was replaced with bonus and penalty dice. If a player shoots in the dark, they don't subtract 20. Keepers are now actively encouraged to use gentle railroading, nudging players along predetermined story paths to keep them from getting lost in complex, layered mysteries. The most effective onboarding tactic modern keepers use is a complete heresy to the original design. They tell new groups to completely ignore the iconic sanity rules during their first one-shot sessions. The community unlocked the game by giving new players permission to bypass legacy mechanics. Focusing on the core narrative first allowed new groups to step into the abyss without stumbling over the simulation. Following the 7th edition revamp, Call of Cthulhu saw explosive growth. On virtual tabletops, it became the 2nd most popular game. This success extends beyond the English-speaking world. In Japan and South Korea, its cosmic horror focus propelled it past Dungeons & Dragons. These figures suggest a massive crossover between high-stakes horror and mainstream gaming. Once the mechanical friction was removed, players proved ready to trade the standard power fantasy for a story of inevitable, collaborative doom. Chaosium proved a specific point about game design. The darkest, most punishing narrative themes will find a massive audience, provided the mechanics guiding them into the abyss are elegant and frictionless.